I wanted to show you was this graph that no one can read at the back because that's how academics like to talk about things. This is from a study called the Global Burden of Disease Study, which is basically a worldwide, not quite worldwide, but almost worldwide study looking at all of the things that kill most of the people in the world. So this one is for Canada. It's from data from 2010, and it is expressed as a percentage of disability adjusted life here. So basically morbidity and mortality, if you mix it together and look at what is causing the greatest burden of disease in Canada, you can see at the very top here, we have dietary risks. And so for, one of the first times, dietary risks are finally outweighing tobacco in terms of lifestyle choices that people are making that are making them sick and killing them more than other things that we do to make ourselves sick and kill ourselves. So dietary risks are at the top there, and then the different colors represent the different kinds of diseases that you get from poor diet quality, including cardiovascular disease, cancers, diabetes, and cardio and circulatory diseases as well. Here are the top, this is such an uplifting presentation in the middle of winter, sorry. The top 10 causes of death in Canada, data from 2012. You can see from this pie chart that the biggest one is cancer, also heart disease is up there, and stroke is also really high. Diabetes is also high. So these, I've circled in red all the ones that are related to the food that we consume. Obviously not all cancer is related to food, but many of the cancers that we get are related to food and our dietary intake. So this is just to position diet and dietary intake as an important determinant of health in this country, and actually globally. And this is only just from considering how we consume food and the nutrients that we get from food, and overconsumption and underconsumption, irrespective of actually how our agricultural production impacts our air quality and our water quality and our soil quality and all the other ways that the way we produce, grow, or the way we produce and transport food and get food through the food system also impacts our health. That's irrespective of actually when we eat it. So, in terms of our diets, this picture probably won't be a huge surprise for people. We all know that we should eat less of the things on the left-hand side, less salt, less sugar, less pop, less meat, less processed foods, and more dark green leafy vegetables and fruits and whole foods and all the sort of good things that we know that we would feel virtuous about eating if we ate them in front of our friends. So this, I don't think, you guys are all here because you think it's worthwhile to spend a Thursday evening talking about the food guide. So obviously you care about food, but I'm pretty sure if I showed this to anyone in Waterloo region, they would not be shocked to see this. So back in 1942, and Stephanie alluded to this, we had Canada's first official food rules. And so that was really different back in 1942. So, and again, this is really small. These are health protective foods. Be sure you eat them every day in at least these amounts. So it talks about milk and cereal and bread, some little circle guy, maybe, fruit, some meat and fish, and they're all looking really happy. Eggs is its own food group as well. And in 1946, the government of Canada put out, sort of attached to this whole idea of food recommendations. Food is urgently needed in Europe and the Far East. Do your bit for hungry humanity by conserving food. Buy less, use less, waste nothing. So that was back in the 40s when the government was saying the things that we're trying to say now, actually, which, of course, some of the people in the food system don't want to say because it means that you'll buy less, which is not good for the economy. Okay, and then, back to 2011, so this is just the brief update. This was actually all the same from 2007, as Ellen just told me, but now this is what our food guide looks like. And so it's much more specific. We have the different food group categories, which you'll hear more about, and it tells you the amounts and how much you should eat based on your sex and based on your age. And more recently, the government of Canada has also begun to put together Indigenous food guides. So traditional foods from land and sea and air, and how those would look in a sort of healthy Indigenous diet. So there are different kinds of food guides for different kinds of populations as well in this country. So in Canada, poor diet quality is very common. So this is some research that we did in 2009-2010 in region of Waterloo, and we had this big sample of people, a representative sample of the people who live in Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo, and we asked a subsample of them about what they ate over a 2-day period, and found that in the region of Waterloo people had, okay, so this is my disclaimer, diet quality we defined as adherence to Canada's food guide, which some people disagree with, but that's how we defined it. And so here's the pop quiz of the night. What proportion of people in this region, what percentage of people do you think had a healthy diet defined as adherence to Canada's food guide?
50%.
50%. Anyone else? 20?
35.
35?
6%. 0.5.
So, oopsies, going the wrong way. It's 0.5. Well, this is in Canada. This is like a representative sample of Canada. In region of Waterloo, we found 0.3. Close enough. So and if you ask people how many people eat a healthy diet, about 75% of us in Canada say, yeah, I have a healthy diet. So this just shows sort of the discrepancy between what we eat and what we think that we eat. And again, the definition is based on adequacy, so are you eating enough whole grains, dark green leafy vegetables, dark orange vegetables, and moderation, so you shouldn't be eating too much saturated fat, I think, Ellen, and other foods and different kinds of components that go into this comprehensive diet quality measure. Okay, so is it that people just don't know, going back to this pretty graph, is it that people don't know this? Or is there something else going on that is explaining the poor diet quality? So, in public health we talk about socioecological models of health, which basically, so this is a concentric circles that basically is a conceptual model to describe why people make individual choices in this middle part. So here we're talking about food choices, so we can think about why people make individual food choices. What is it that will cause us to make a choice to eat a Mars bar or an apple or a carrot stick or a bag of chips? And so this model suggests that there are factors at the individual level, your own taste preferences, your history, the things that comfort you when you eat them and make you feel good. There are things at the interpersonal level, so what are your friends eating? That affects what you eat. At the organizational level, your workplace cafeteria or your school cafeteria or the foods that are offered, or if your kid's school has a pizza day, those things influence diets. At your community level, the density of fast food outlets around your house or convenience stores, or your proximity to a grocery store or other things like that might also affect your food choices. And then at the public policy level, there's things like agricultural subsidies that can affect the food supply that then affect the available foods that affect our choices and constrain our choices. So this is a way that public health researchers typically understand behaviors and health outcomes, whether you're talking about smoking, tanning, unsafe sex, eating, whatever it is, it's just this idea that there's lots of things that affect and constrain our choices that we make. So there's diverse factors, there's multiple levels of influence, and that these influencers interact with one another. So another sort of model that we think about this is called a health impact pyramid. And so basically in public health and health promotion, we can think about intervening. So imagine if you had a little lever to press at these different levels of intervention. As you go down the pyramid, or down the triangle, if you press a lever, you will have a greater population health impact if you change something at the lower levels, and you will have lower effort by individuals needed to sustain that behavior change. So for example, if you wanted to change how many French fries people ate, you could counsel them and educate them and tell them, don't eat so many French fries, and then they would go back into McDonald's and they'd get asked, do you want fries with that? And they'd say yes, because fries are delicious. Or you could change how McDonald's asks people if they want French fries. You could change marketing of French fries. You could tax junk foods or whatever. You could change the context to actually make default decisions be the healthier ones. So instead of asking, do you want fries, you could say, do you want apple slices with that? Or those kinds of things, which might just nudge people to make it that it's just the usual behavior. It takes less effort to make a healthier choice than it would to make an unhealthy choice. Okay, so that's another way of thinking about when we change things, what level are we intervening and what impact do we think it's going to have? So one of the best or most well-regarded medical journals in the world is called the Lancet. And in 2015, they had a whole series of their journal about obesity. And so one of the conclusions that this series came to was that poor nutrition is a logical response to our current retail food environment. And specifically, today's food retail environments exploit people's biological, psychological, social, and economic vulnerabilities, making it easier for them to eat unhealthy foods. So in other words, the default retail food environments, whether it's the grocery store, fast food outlets, restaurants, convenience stores, libraries, wherever you find food, they are sort of structured in a way based on our food system and our food marketing and all the other things that just make it actually easier and logical for people to choose less healthy food. So what is the retail food environment? It's the availability, quality, and marketing of foods and drinks within a specified geographic area. So it's basically what we have access to in space and time, depending on where we live and work and play. Here is a picture of the region of Waterloo. This is from a while ago, 2011. So things have changed if you've been around since then. Things have changed since then. But this shows all of the retail food premises in 2011 in the region of Waterloo. And overlaid with that is a map of walkability. So this is just, so Waterloo, Kitchener, and then Cambridge. And you can see that the food is kind of clustered around the transit corridors, and there's way more food now than there was 7 years ago when this map was created. And this is some of the work that I did for my PhD those years ago. And we looked at access, physical access to people's food, and then we looked at all of the restaurants, all of the independently owned restaurants, one of each chain. We looked at all the grocery stores, convenience stores, a bunch of food outlets in the region of Waterloo, in the 3 cities, and found that on average people live about 1 kilometer from the nearest grocery store, about 520 meters from the nearest convenience store, and 580 meters from the nearest fast food outlet, which is totally unsurprising because convenience stores are convenient because they're everywhere and they're close. Fast food outlets are supposed to be convenient to go to, and grocery stores are bigger, so there's not as many of them. There's also 5.6 times as many convenience stores and fast food outlets in this region, or at least there was at this time, as there are grocery stores and specialty stores within 1 kilometer of people's homes. So in other words, the sources, and convenience stores and fast food outlets are typically considered to be sources of less healthy foods than grocery stores. And so just based on physical proximity alone, it seems like, yeah, poor diets kind of make sense because that's where we live and what we have access to in physical space. So there's sort of the geographic component of what we have access to, which influences potentially what we buy and what we consume. There's also the inside of retail food outlets that affect our choices. And people way smarter than me design the places where we buy and eat food. So this is a typical grocery store layout. And if you ever go to a public health nutritionist at the region of Waterloo, they may take you on a grocery store tour or teach you how to grocery shop. And what they would say to you is, when you go in the doors, which are like here-ish, you walk around the perimeter, because that's where the food guide foods are, the food group foods. So walk through the fresh fruit and veggies, go to the, buy a couple things in the deli, don't go too crazy. Your meat, poultry, and seafood at the end, dairy and eggs, frozen fruits and veggies, fresh breads. Shop here for high protein cereals, nut butters, canned beans and tomatoes and dried fruits, but avoid this area most of the time, because as we all know, this entire aisle is chips and this entire aisle is pop. So you're gonna buy something if you walk down here. And there's been studies done that have looked at how people navigate grocery stores, how quickly they walk, and whether they follow their list, and how often they look at things. And if you touch something, you're more likely to buy it, and like impulse shopping, all this kind of thing. So they would say, stick to the perimeter, that's where the healthier foods are, only go in here for the healthy stuff. And then on your way, as you're walking from your fresh breads, you're walking here to get into line at the cash register. Oopsies, this is what you see. So as you have resisted temptation the whole way through the grocery store, all of a sudden you're like, oh, $4.99 for that giant thing of delicious chocolate-covered dried mangoes? Okay, this is my friend Kathy, by the way. We do a lot of work together, so I'll have to let her know that I showed her picture to all these things. So this is in St. John's. We were at a talk. We went to a food environments thing. I know there's actual things about food environments in St. John's, Newfoundland. We went to the grocery store and I had to take a little picture of this because I thought it was perfect for these kinds of talks. Now, so this is one example of impulse buys of our retail food environment sort of tempting us when we've already used up all of our willpower. Here's another store. Who knows where this is? Dutchies! So I took this picture as I was waiting in line because I was like, oh, isn't this interesting that the impulse buys here are like 10-pound bags of onions and mandarin oranges. But then, as my husband points out, like where I'm standing is like right by the candy and those little clear plastic Tupperwares of like other things to also buy. But that's not in the picture, so it doesn't count. Anyway, so I just thought that the consumer experience is really different if you're shopping in Dutchies as opposed to shopping somewhere else where you're being bombarded with like loads of candy all up front. Another example of something we probably don't even think about when we think about the retail food environment. This is in an airport. These are everywhere, right? They're all over the place. And this is a Pepsi machine. And you can see, and the reason I took this picture was because I thought it was so adorable. Does anyone see the sign? Calories count. Calories count. Check. Then choose. And I thought it was so adorable that Pepsi cares about your health. So I had to take the picture. And also when I tried to check the calories on the Pepsi things, you can see they're like, you can't even see them. So thanks. Vending machine. And where's the water also? Okay. So another example of like lots of extra calories in your diet that you can drink in 5 minutes and not think about it, but it'll affect your health in the long term. Another example, food marketing. And this is also in the food strategy that the federal government's developing, marketing to kids. What do you notice about this picture? It's all Cheerios. But which ones have the Star Wars characters on them? Not the low sugar version, right? This one has, I think, how much sugar does, I think like less than 5 grams of sugar per serving. Multigrain has a little bit, has more, and then Honey Nut Cheerios are like the sugary kind. And I just thought, isn't that interesting that the ones without sugar, or with much less sugar, don't have the cool Star Wars characters on them?
They're evil characters.
There you go. There's also boxes though that had like, I think, the princesses and the other people on Star Wars. I'm like named after the movie, I don't even know who they are. Alright, so marketing to kids, also hugely impactful in terms of our diet as parents, but also for our children and our families. So there's marketing to kids within stores, but there's also marketing outside of stores. So this is an ad from New York City that's called It's Sugar, You Know You Want It. And the girl with the bowl full of broccoli looks like she just would rather not be alive. And the girl with all the candy necklaces is like, yes, let's have a party. So there's advertising everywhere for food as well. So there's advertising, there's availability, there's different kinds of quality. There's also, in our northern communities, price. It's everywhere. Price is everywhere, right? Everything that we buy, food is a commodity, so we'll buy it. For 4 oranges, this is in Attawapiskat, for 4 oranges, $9.30, and $4.89 per kilogram of bananas, which works out to like $2.50 or something per pound, which is like 3.5 to 4 times more expensive than we buy in Southern Ontario for bananas. And look at the quality. They're not like beautiful bananas. They're kind of a little bit on the brown side already. So there's loads of things that affect our food choices and what we buy, including marketing, price, availability, etc. And there's also in Waterloo region lots of great examples of sources of healthy food. So these two pictures are from the Kitchener Farmers Market, where I love to go. This is in my neighborhood, Chelsea Market. They opened up a little while ago and they sell lots of different kinds of foods. And then those are just also, I think those are from the Kitchener Farmers Market too, and they just look pretty, so I took a picture. So there's lots of opportunities to eat healthily as well, but often the opportunities to eat less healthily are more abundant to us and also cheaper per calorie. So just to sum up, I know we're here to talk about the food guide tonight. And I think that if we want to change Canadians' diets, or change people in the region of Waterloo's diets in response to a different Canada's food guide or a more legible or understandable version of Canada's food guide, the recommendations will only be as successful as the environments that will support our healthy diets. So we can go back thinking about that pyramid that I showed you earlier. Canada's food guide is still an educational tool. So as we can educate people till the cows come home, and people will still continue to respond to their environments, right? So I think that it's important to have good, high-quality, evidence-based recommendations for healthy diets, for sure. But we also need to recognize that food availability, cost, marketing, all influence our choices. And right now, these choices, our sort of choice structure, falls short of the recommendations. And of course, in public health and when nutrition, we often think that food is about nutrition, and that's what everyone cares about. It's not actually true. That it's a factor of why people make some food choices, but other times it's because you want to be social, you want to have something that's delicious, and when you add salt, sugar, and fat to things, they get more delicious, because that's how we are biologically programmed. And not just about that, but the agriculture and food industry is a huge industry in Canada. So while I think healthy eating recommendations should be independent of industry influence, agricultural policy and other kinds of policies that influence our food supply cannot only be about nutrition and are not only about nutrition. So I think we need to strongly consider and think about what other factors play a role in how our government recommends healthy diets. I think, and you'll hear more about the industry influence, I think, tonight on the Healthy Food Guide, and more from our actual restaurateur's perspective as well about the business angle of things. I'm assuming that's what you talk about. All right, so that's all for me. And now it's home. Thank you.